Welcome once again to the FriendmueCast. I'm your host, Segalacious, and today's guest is sure to provide for one of our most insightful conversations yet. He's known for getting real arcade hardware running on flat screen displays in the home, like the Sega Naomi 2, and for being a huge fan of Virtua Fighter and making a simply beautiful retrospective on Shenmue. The one and only RetroMuel. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Oh
Glad
man,
to
yeah,
be here.
your Shenmue video, it really got me in the feels, as the kids say, and I just feel like the way you conveyed your feelings about the game in such an articulate and penetrating way was very impressive to me.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been seen by not exactly huge numbers, but the comments I've got have been really nice. It seems to be connecting with people, so that's great.
Well, hopefully this will help you get some more numbers on it because it certainly deserves to be seen. I really like the part in the video where you called the game an aching romance that is a glimpse of how things could be if the world happened to be a nicer place. And
hmm
I was wondering, could you further elaborate on that point for us?
Yeah, I mean, there is kind of a melancholy to the whole series. I think it's there right from the start of the first game. Starts with a tragedy, which is pretty uncommon in video games. The whole thing kind of is propelled on from that point, really. Um, I think there's kind of a connection between Dio and also the developers of the game. Um, the two of them seem to have similar ideals in a way. Dio faces insurmountable odds. Everybody tells him you're going to get your ass kicked. Basically,
Yeah,
this is a hopeless
right.
situation. Um, you shouldn't waste your life on revenge. Yada yada yada. And that seems to me to kind of reflect Yu Suzuki and the team's spirit, if you will, of making the game. Such a huge budget, such a massive project, probably too big for its own good. Um, and yet they went with it, We're just going to make the most amazing thing we can possibly make. And somehow it will succeed, without much regard for market trends and stuff like that. So I think there is a certain romance in that, if that makes sense.
Oh no, it totally makes sense. I get that as well. I think listening to you say that, it makes me think of a video I made a long time ago. I had this theory about Shenmue. I felt like the narrative of the game was very parallel to the narrative of Sega's corporate business model at the time, and
hmm
the way EWOW was trounced by Land D kind of made me think of how the PlayStation totally eviscerated the Sega Saturn.
Yeah.
And then the Dreamcast ran in and it was like, I'll avenge you, father. And then Land D, the PlayStation 2 defeats the Dreamcast even easier than
Yeah.
the PlayStation 1 defeated the Saturn. And maybe that's me projecting, but it really was, um, there was a bit of poetic irony in that, I would think.
Yeah, definitely. I think they really put their balls on the line with the Dreamcast. All the chips went in, the kitchen sink, everything else. Um, they were trying to make a sort of preemptive strike, I guess, on the PS2, and it was, in that samurai way, kind of charge in, screaming, and hope for the best. But unfortunately, it didn't work out. But they left behind, games like Panzer Dragoon Saga and Shenmue 2. Just, I can't really think of any parallels. They're just truly unique games.
Yeah, and it's such a fascinating thing too, because what makes it so tragic, what makes it that aching romance, is just the idea that you can tell they really believed, they had faith that if you make a game with enough love and put enough quality into it, that guarantees that people will come and that it will be a success. And
Mm.
the sad reality is, just because a game deserves to be a success doesn't mean that it will be.
Yeah, definitely. It's a cruel world, unfortunately.
Oh man. I
But
mean, that's yeah.
you know, at least we have those things here to enjoy, and talk about, and maybe we'll get some sequels one day.
Well, that's the thing about it is it's almost like Shenmue almost transcends itself. It transcends its own failure, its own commercial failure, and it like mythologizes itself because in making that noble self-sacrifice, it actually lives on as a cult classic among fans, and so that actually has, in a way, made it more successful than it maybe could have been. Maybe not financially as successful as it could have been, but it's made it more culturally relevant than it maybe could have been without such a tragic fate for the series.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think it's sort of sowed seeds. Didn't have much joy at the time. Well, it sold fairly well, didn't it? I think was it 1.2 million or something like that.
Yeah, the first one sold
But
pretty decent. Um,
not the
but
second one.
of course it was bottlenecked. Yeah, the second one. Well, the second one had a lot of. I mean, we could get into the whole like putting Shenmue 2 on the original Xbox exclusively in the North American region and stuff, but um,
No, but I think that's true. It kind of, in a way, adds to the mystique. It's one of these lost games. It's probably slightly too big to be a cult game exactly.
yeah, and it
Um,
well, mm, too
but
big to be a
it's,
cult game. I think it was bottlenecked by the install base of the Dreamcast,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and the Dreamcast was successful enough, but it's kind of weird because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the UK, I feel like the Dreamcast and Saturn and Genesis did better there than it did in the States.
Um, I don't think the Saturn did very well. I think
Not the Saturn.
Genesis Mega Drive was big. It was definitely bigger than the SNES, as we called it, Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Um, but it was
Whereas in
fairly
the
close.
States, the
But
SNES and the Genesis, the Mega Drive, they were like neck and neck.
yeah, okay, yeah,
But
yeah.
over across the pond with you guys, it was like, nope, Genesis pretty much trounced the SNES, right?
Yeah, I think pretty much. I mean, I did know a couple of Super Nintendo owners, but yeah, I definitely had a dislike for Mario as a child until the N64 days, and
Oh,
then I got
yeah.
into it.
We would have fought on
But
the playground. We would have had words.
all right. Well, I see the error of my ways now. Those games are fantastic, but yeah, the Saturn, it was a bit of a laughing stock, to be honest. At the time, as I remember it. But I don't know. It was. I actually had a PlayStation for a year or so in probably '95. I was a lucky kid. I got it for my birthday and had it for about a year. And I actually sold it because my older brother had a Saturn. He had Knights and he had Virtua Fighter and stuff. And I just wanted my own. So I ended up selling the PS1 and buying a Sega Saturn for Christmas.
I mean, if that was your exposure to the Saturn, Virtua Fighter and Knights, I can hardly blame you because there wasn't much on the PlayStation, especially early on in its library, that could hold up to that. I mean, once you got around to like Metal Gear Solid and stuff, maybe I could
Mm,
people might
yeah.
question that decision, but I mean,
Yeah, the early days, it was Wipeout was huge in Europe. I don't think it's quite as big in the States, but it was absolutely incredible at the time as a launch game. And Destruction Derby as well,
oh,
Toshinden, that kind of thing. There was a kind of
oh,
initial, but then there seemed to be. There was Resident Evil came out a little bit later.
right.
Um, but yeah, I think it was
Battle
kind of
Arena
drips and drabs.
Toshinden, was that what I heard you say?
Yeah, I remember
Oh
that
boy.
at the right at the start, and everybody found it incredibly impressive. But it hasn't held up too well.
Well, but
Um,
the thing is, the Saturn, I think the Saturn definitely deserved to be a huge runaway success as a
mm,
system. I mean, it was different in that it didn't lean into 3D architecture quite as much as the PS1 and N64 did. But I mean, I feel like maybe the entire industry dipped into 3D architecture a tad prematurely. And I kind of, looking back, seeing how things aged, I really think that the Saturn's approach aged much better, and was much more elegant in many of its games than what the PS1 and N64 had to offer.
yeah, I agree totally. Actually, I think the games have, generally speaking, have held up better because I mean, basically all 3D games of that era look poor today.
Right, and then you look at Knights, it looks great, and there's no horrible camera issues, and
yeah, Knights looks good. I love the Panzer Dragoon games, particularly well, Saga, but also Zwei, the second one. I just think that looks incredible, you know, and it was there were unique things that the Saturn was doing there.
yeah,
There's a really
definitely.
good digital foundry about this, you know, the water technique that they used.
Yeah,
That kind of thing you couldn't be done on the PS1.
yeah, the
Obviously the
infinite
PS1.
planes too, right? They couldn't, the PS1 couldn't generate the polygons to create an infinite plane like what Panzer Dragoon had.
Yeah, yeah, it was. I still think it looks amazing now. You know, obviously it's the pixels look like Duplo, you know, but the art design and everything is so strong, and the atmosphere is completely unique. You know, it's a classic.
Yeah,
But I think, you
that's
know,
the thing. Sorry, go ahead.
as all the 2D games and stuff, you know, sprite stuff in general, I think has held up better. You know, it's kind of stylized. There's just so much more of that on the Saturn than there is on the PS1, and so some of that stuff just looks great to this day.
Yeah, I definitely share that sentiment. And that's why it's so puzzling to me. I mean, the Panzer Dragoon, yes, it's a classic. Shenmue, yes, it's a classic. And yet they didn't take off and become industry dominating games like you think they would have. It's like the rules for the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive, they didn't the rules were if you made a great game, people would buy it. And then that started to change a little bit, and it was more about like marketing and corporate politics and being sly on the business end. And I think about this quote from Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek: The Next Generation. I mean, I figure I can get pretty nerdy here since we're talking about video games, anyways. But there's an episode where he says, "It is possible to do everything right and still lose. That is not weakness. That is life."
Ah,
And I think
yes,
about how, there are so many games that do deserve success and some games that are successful that don't seem like they deserve to be as successful as they are, like maybe like Fortnite or um, I don't know. I feel like I don't really understand how Call of Duty got as big as it did for so many years. I mean, that pretty much
oh
dominated the whole PS3 360 era. Like it was just all that.
yeah,
Um, and
yeah,
now it's like every single game is an Assassin's Creed clone or a Dark Souls clone, and it's like, okay, I'm not saying those don't deserve success, but I just think, there's games like Shining Force. Um, I really loved Devil's Third on the Wii U, Skies of Arcadia, Panzer
hmm
Dragoon. I mean, the Dreamcast itself compared to the PlayStation 2. If you look at just the launch titles for the Dreamcast and then compare that launch to the PS2's, if it was just about games, there is no way the PS2 should have trounced the Dreamcast as much as it did. If it was about having the best games, the Dreamcast on paper should have won.
yeah, definitely. It did have a great library. It was only around for a short space of time, obviously, but I think I really like the, you know, the aesthetics of the Dreamcast and everything. It's like a breath of fresh air. You know, it's very light and airy and kind of, and I think it was kind of it's a cliche, but ahead of its time. You know, it almost has that iPod aesthetic to it. You know, which
Yeah, it kind
Apple
of
would.
does. Yeah, they kind of had the Apple it's like a proto Apple product in a lot of ways, but which is weird because it's actually a Microsoft collaboration, but
Yeah, yeah, that is kind of ironic, but it's like I don't know. I don't know why it didn't catch on. I mean, the marketing was terrible in the UK. Um,
mhm.
I think the commercials might have been a little bit better in the US than the ones I've seen on YouTube. But here
Yeah.
we had one. I remember the main advert on the TV was it was like a in a sort of barber shop in Spain or somewhere, and loads of these bald guys getting their heads shaved, and they were having like a competition to see who could finish having their hair cut first. I mean, it was about as lame as it sounds, really. It had Robbie Williams on the soundtrack, and it didn't show any games whatsoever. And the kind of hook was like player one wins, you know, a
That
Dreamcast up to 6 billion players. That was the tagline. And that was it. And that's about it. all I can remember, to be honest, on the TV from the Dreamcast. And it was just, I mean, if you're not even going to show any games, because it's not as if you looked at Dreamcast games, you only have to show them. You know, I mean, they made games on the PS1 and the N64 look very crude, you know, to put it politely. So they
Yeah.
could have absolutely smoked him, I think, but for some reason they just put the games on the TV, man. You know, people can see. But so I don't know what they were thinking, to be honest.
I mean, it's probably a bunch of old guys in charge of marketing that don't understand video games at all. And, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
I think video games were still becoming as mainstream as they are today. They were still kind of one foot in, one foot out. And so you still had a
Hmm.
little bit of that Wild West kind of aspect to video games and marketing. And but I mean that's the thing is like if the marketing's not good, if it doesn't have a DVD player included in it, like
Oh yeah,
nowadays
yeah.
in hindsight, nobody really cares about DVDs anymore. Nobody cares about physical movies. I mean, in the mainstream, of course, there are collectors, you know, and film buffs, but nobody really cares about physical media in terms of films at all. And
Mm.
so, when you go back and you look at how clean the Dreamcast picture quality is and compare it to the PlayStation 2, you're like, wow, Dreamcast really holds up kind of a lot better than the PS2. Why did it get destroyed so bad? Well, it's because you know, Sony's marketing could kind of tap into the zeitgeist of the time and find a good um, gimmick that people could latch onto. I mean, you could see 3D graphics are like a gimmick.
Mm.
Having a DVD player in your console is kind of a gimmick too, and it's trendy. You know, the motion controls for the Wii made it really put that over the top, but in hindsight it hasn't aged well at all. But it doesn't matter because at the time it made them sell gangbusters. So
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's strange, isn't it? And it was so well designed, the Dreamcast. You know, from what little I understand about development, you know, it was just so easy to develop for. It had Microsoft CE, was it?
yes,
Um, Running under the hood, as they say. So yeah, it makes no sense. They had internet, you know. I think that was
that was the gimmick, but they
yeah.
were like half a step too early on that. That's the thing.
Mm,
They could never like hit the nail on the head. They would either be a little too soon. Yeah, they'd be a little too ambitious each time, and they would lay the foundation for other companies to benefit from. But they themselves were the innovators and the trailblazers, and it didn't pay off for them. It just paid off for people who could follow in their footsteps. Um,
yeah, sure. Then Xbox Live, as you say, comes in, and that catches on. You know,
yeah, exactly.
just a couple of years later.
Well, or
Strange.
Shenmue comes out, pioneers open world games, not in the same way, of course, that open world games exist today, but it did pioneer open world games, and then other games follow in its footsteps and really
Mm,
take off and become popular. And even games like the Yakuza series, they're not directly comparable to Shenmue, but they'll take one or two superficial aspects of Shenmue and extrapolate those into a whole game in its own right, and then that becomes super popular. So it's almost like Shenmue was too ambitious. It was too many games rolled into one. And if you just take two or three things and make a game just about those, it's way more successful with Yakuza than with, you know, the 10 different genres rolled together, confusing people in Shenmue 1 and 2. So,
yeah, they take out a lot of the interesting stuff, and you know, and then it catches on.
yeah.
Um, I mean, Yakuza, that's a great game,
Oh, no, it's great. Yeah.
but it's a very different beast, in my opinion, to Shenmue. You know.
I fully agree. So, what inspired you to make your Shenmue video in the first place? Because I followed you for a long time, just watching your hardware videos and getting you know PCBs up and running on a flat screen, or you know getting arcade hardware captured and running. And I thought that was really cool. And I had no idea until a couple weeks ago that you were a big Shenmue fan, and you
Mm.
consider Shenmue an impossible dream, and you want that impossible dream to live on. And so, what inspired you to make that video now of all times?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there wasn't a huge agenda behind it. I mean, I think, as you say, I was putting bits and bobs up on YouTube for a few years, and I wanted to do something a little more substantial. You know, I think I had more in the tank. so to speak. I got some half decent gear, capture cards and that kind of thing, and just fancied making a documentary style video,
Yeah.
and possible topics. What I could talk for hours about Shenmue. So this stuff's been in my head since I was about 16. So it's you know, but I think I could. There's been a lot of great stuff, a lot of great material around Shenmue over the years. So I started to think, well, I mean, it's been done so many times. What can I kind of bring to the table that hasn't been done already? So I thought, I'm not going to go for an objective kind of overview about the development and all this, that, and the other. I'm going to take a more subjective take on it, kind of give a view from the ground level in a way, as the landscape as I saw it in the UK at that time. All the promotional stuff, all the hype around the game, or lack of it,
I
and
thought your
and then I
your
could talk about.
perspective made for such a fascinating take. So you definitely did have a lot to offer, in my opinion. I didn't. I was just trying to chime in there, but yeah, please continue. I just wanted to add that in there.
It's I definitely think there were certain things that hadn't been articulated, about Shenmue. I think a lot of the people get there's certain things about the sort of melancholy aspect of it and the strange kind of unsettling atmosphere at times in Shenmue seems to escape most people. I think it's fair to say, like particularly in the first game, not so
Hmm.
much the second. That was one aspect of it I wanted to discuss. Um, it wasn't directly sort of targeted at the YouTube, uh, hype around Shenmue 3 and a lot of the negativity around that. I didn't want to target that specifically, but try and just keep the peace and carry on, enjoy it in my own way as a general rule. But
Right.
certainly I thought, here and there I could comment on what I thought made the game great, what made it special and what keeps it special to this day, what distinguishes it from open world games, modern open world games, what distinguishes it from Yakuza.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely such a refreshing take to hear you talk about that, and I think you have a great point that Shenmue is one of those games that its hooks they 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 snare you and they go so deep into you, um, especially if you played back in the day, that it resonates with you and that passion stays with you and builds over the years, and you have all these like really strong feelings about this game and how it's in your formative years and how it in a lot of ways it changes you into the person you become today, and that those passionate feelings build and build and build until you just have to let them out and share them with people. I think that's part of what led me to start making Shenmue videos on YouTube as well, because I just felt like I was watching all these people make videos and I wanted more, but I wanted people to talk about the games in a certain way. Um,
Mm,
I was thinking like, doesn't anybody feel the way about these games that I did and
mm,
do? Doesn't anybody
mm,
understand them and enjoy them in the way that I do? And people weren't making that content, so I thought, well, I'll just have to make it myself.
mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what you did too. But I just really, I was like, that's exactly. To be honest, if you had made that video a few years ago, I may not have started making YouTube videos, just because I'm like, good, somebody's doing it. It was really, really
Oh, that's
awesome.
great, man. That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to get frustrated with some of the YouTube stuff. It's not just Shenmue; it's everything. People are so hypersensitive these days. It's if Shenmue 3 comes out and it's not absolutely perfect, then suddenly you want to go and stab Yu Suzuki, or
Yeah.
you
Oh
know,
man.
I just, I mean, I try not to take it in too deeply because that's just the path to, hate, isn't it? As Yoda might say. But
Yeah. It's not following the voodoo.
yeah, exactly. Lessons learned from Shenmue. But it is, yeah, it's infuriating at times. I mean, Who's that guy with the kind of buck tooth? The American guy. He's got kind of ginger hair. He made this
Hmm.
absolutely horrible video about Shenmue 3.
Oh, wait,
What's the guy's name
is
now?
he a popular YouTuber or is he kind of a smaller channel?
I think he's popular-ish. He's not one of the big guns.
Okay.
Um, but anyway, so much vitriol about it, and there's something about Shenmue that seems to just offend people so much. I can't really get my head around it. It's
It does seem like there are a lot of hateful bucktooth gingers out there that don't like Shenmue. I don't know. I'm just kidding.
yeah.
But that does seem characteristic of the type of people that are like, oh, Shenmue, I'm so sick of this game. Please. They just get in there, they just and screech the whole time. But no, I kid, of course. I know plenty of bucktooth gingers that are really nice people and also like Shenmue. So,
Of course. Yeah.
by the way, which Shenmue game in the series was your favorite? Because you kind of talked about all three here and there.
Yeah, I can't. Well, it's the first two, to be honest.
Hmm.
But I really can't say which. There's such kind of distinct vibes to the two games.
Hmm.
At the risk of sounding really pretentious, Shenmue 1 sounds, it's just like a winter game, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Shenmue 2 is like a summer game. I mean, obviously the two are set in summer and winter, more or less.
Yeah.
I mean, if you kind of came at me with a knife and forced me to choose, I would probably say Shenmue 2, just because of the amount of content in there. It's just an absolute powerhouse. It amazed me at the time. It just kept going.
Oh
So many
yeah.
locations and so many story events. And by the time it got to the last disc, I thought this must be the end now, on top of the Yellowhead building.
Right.
And then it just says insert disc 4, and
I
you
know, and you're
carry
so
on, and
happy.
you've
You're like, yay, it's not over.
yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking the fourth disc's got to be like a passport thing, like in the
Hmm.
first game. But then it's this whole other chapter in Guilin, it just kept going. It's an incredible game. So yeah, if you force me, I'd say Shenmue 2.
Yeah, I mean, not a bad choice at all. I'm more of a Shenmue 1 man myself, but it
Hmm.
kind of depends on um, what makes Shenmue good to you. That kind of informs which of the two games you'll pick. A lot of people can't pick between them because they are very similar and they see them as just one cohesive story. Some people feel like the story doesn't really pick up and start going until Shenmue 2, and that Shenmue 1 is more of a prologue.
Hmm.
Um, and so,
Um, yeah, I suppose that's true to a point, but I think they're both unique. The first one has that kind of almost an Animal Crossing vibe, that little town.
I've said that for years, especially because you can play video games in the game. Um,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah,
a
and all
lot
the
of people
little
look at me and they go,
characters,
Animal
it's
Crossing. What are you talking about? It's not like Animal Crossing, but I'm grateful to hear you say
yeah.
that because I'm not the only one that had that thought. So
No, there is an element of like an alternate reality, or so. What's the kind of life
simulator,
simulator or something like that? I
yeah.
think there's an aspect to that, definitely. And it's by the time Shenmue 2 came out, I think certain other games were starting to catch up in the 3D graphics, world building scales. You had things like Final Fantasy X and Metal Gear Solid 2, and probably a couple of other examples. But Shenmue 1 was so far ahead of its time. It was just ridiculous, basically. I was just kind of open mouthed the
Yeah,
first
I
time
mean
I played it.
it came out in 1999.
Yeah,
I mean, what
yeah.
else came out in 1999 around that time? Final Fantasy 8? Like, come on,
Oh,
dude. Like,
yeah. It was just, from a different planet, basically. I mean, PC stuff, that was the most powerful platform I guess you could get at the time. Might have had like a Voodoo 3 or something like that, maybe.
mm,
But the Dreamcast graphics just blew it out of the water. Not just that, but the production values as well.
yes.
It
Yeah,
was
certainly.
incredible.
Certainly incredible. I would totally agree. Yeah, I think I would agree that Shenmue 1 definitely has more of a simulation quality to it. It's a lot more experimental in that way, I suppose. And I feel like Shenmue 2 is slightly less simulation oriented, slightly less experimental, and it's a little bit more refined. But
Yeah.
for me, the reason I like Shenmue 1 a bit more is I feel like it's more consistent. I feel like it's got this high level of quality that it just maintains the whole time. I feel like Shenmue 2, it has highs that are higher than Shenmue 1, but it has lows that are lower than Shenmue 1. So like,
Hmm.
like you said, you have um well, I'm struggling to find a good example, I guess, but I should have written this down maybe, but I'm think like, okay, all right, in Shenmue, when you go get a job, it's like, okay, cool. I finally got money. The only ways I can get money are from Ine-san or from driving my forklift. In
Hmm.
Shenmue 2, it's way easier to make money and the gambling is much better. But carrying crates is not as fun as driving a forklift.
No, it's
So
not.
it's like a step forward and a step back at the same time.
Yeah,
Um,
especially with a man with a personality disorder like Delin. The
right.
guy is ordering you to go left, 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 right, 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 even though the crate is just a straight line.
Yeah. Even though
He
that was
always
kind
amuses
of
me.
it was setting you up for the plank walking later, I
Yeah.
guess, in a way. Um, but yeah, the plank walking is another thing. Like you have the QTEs in Shenmue 1 and they were great, but Shenmue 2 kind of improves on them because you have like those multiple input QTEs where you do like a move. I love those. Those are so cool. Like when you do the counter elbow assault on Don Yu at the end on top of the Yellowhead building and you gotta like, you
Mm.
know, do like
Oh, it's
three different
amazing.
inputs in one QTE. Like I thought that was great. But then you're stuck on a plank and you got to walk through
Oh,
the Thousand White building or whatever it is, or no, it's the Ghost Hall building. I mean, you're walking through the Ghost Hall building and you're like, oh man, like,
yeah. I'm actually doing a Shenmue 2 video at the moment, so I played through it. Kind of
yeah,
rushed it, to be honest, because I just wanted to capture things.
right.
But yeah, that bit in the Ghost Hall building had me tearing my hair out, you know. It's like, I mean, I think I used to write it down on a piece of paper back in the day because the final two planks, I think they speed up the amount of time you have to react is a lot less, and it's just an
Hmm.
absolute nightmare, especially with a 2-year-old running around at home. You know, it's
Right. But I mean,
um,
if those things don't take away from the experience at all for you, then you would prefer Shenmue 2 because it does do many things better than one. It just does a lot of things worse than one as well for me. And for me, that detracted enough for me to still prefer Shenmue 1 because I feel like it's a smooth, consistent experience the whole time. But like I said, it depends on what you value. And I was just kind of wondering, what is it about Shenmue that stands out to you as the reason why it's good? It can be for any of the games, really.
uh, I think there's probably two main points for me. I think one's the kind of the storytelling, um, which I think right from the bat, you know, it's almost like a first person perspective. You're right there in Dio's shoes right from the get go, and also it starts off with such a clearly defined bad guy, good guy, you know, and it also starts with a tragedy, which gives you that motivation, which runs all the way through the two games. They also set up so well how much of a badass Landy is. You know, he's seems invincible. Basically, he
Yeah.
just wipes the floor with Dio's dad. Um, and that's, you know, we could go on about the other two games, but I think the
By the
storytelling
way,
is,
not to cut you off, but as a Virtua Fighter fan, when you saw those scenes, did that scream Virtua Fighter to you? Did that jump out to you and make you go like, "Oh, I know what this is"? Or
yeah,
would Mhm.
I think I'd caught wind that, you know, because back in the day, you had to go off magazines. That was all you could get, basically. So I used
Yeah.
to read the official Dreamcast magazine. I think I'd caught wind that Yu Suzuki had made the game, and it had some of the Virtua Fighter DNA in it, you
Mm.
know, beforehand. But
Mhm.
yeah, that was a big draw for me because he does like, I don't know who Landy resembles most closely. Is he kind of Lao, I guess? I don't
Yeah, I
know.
would say so.
It's kind of a mixture. He's got the ponytail.
And he
Um,
dresses in the fancy silk.
of course he does. Yeah, yeah. So I think the storytelling's so strong. I mean, particularly probably the second game, it does take off in a more direct way. Um, and then the other aspect is probably the world building, you know, and the sense of place um, in those two games. is really completely unique, and they're unique from each other as well. This
Hmm.
small town is kind of perpetually overcast. You've got snow and rain, and um, the second game, it's all kind of, you can almost smell the kind of fried noodles and
Hmm.
the decaying apartment blocks and all that kind of thing. I don't think, even to this day, any game has had such a strong and sort of consistent sense of place as the Shenmue games. You're
Yeah, very
absolutely,
immersive, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the kind of, it's almost kind of hypnotic, the when you're just wandering around town, almost like a Lonely Planet travel guide or something. Just taking in the little details here and there. Um, yeah, unique. And if you don't enjoy those kinds of things, then you think it's a piece of shit, basically, because nothing happens. But for me,
Yeah.
it was just pure gold. I took it all in.
Yep.
Um,
Right, definitely. I mean, that's the thing. Taste, people, that's what bothers me about people on the internet and armchair critics today is they think that if a game is not to their taste, that it automatically makes the game bad. But it's kind of like, look, I don't like certain foods, For example, like I could say that I don't like pumpkin pie, maybe. But I can appreciate that if someone makes a really high quality pumpkin pie, I should say, hey, that's a good pumpkin pie. Pumpkin pies aren't for me, but I can appreciate the craftsmanship, and I can, you ought to be able to step back from your own subjectivity and just acknowledge the craftsmanship and quality of something, even if it's not to your taste.
yeah, definitely. I feel like kind of sounding like a bit of an old man, but the internet is just, people have forgotten how to socialize. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just take a balanced view of things. As you say, exactly. If it's not to your taste, then you have to kind of take a step to the side, a bit of lateral thinking, and try and see it from someone else's perspective. People seem to be incapable of doing that these days, or certain people anyway.
Right. No,
Um,
I love sounding like an old man. I'll say it to these kids
yeah,
that aren't getting off my lawn. I mean, society is regressing. People
yeah,
aren't as polite. There's no
yeah.
no respect for their elders.
Just throwing copies of Shenmue at passing children.
Yeah, what the heck? Playing Among
Uh,
Us.
yeah.
Gosh
Oh,
dang.
I know. It's
Super sus.
yeah, it is.
That would be fun. Make a Shenmue game that was the same as Among Us. Like you could play as different Shenmue people and try to figure out which one's not the NPC.
Right.
And
Is that
try to like
the
have
PS4 thing? Is that the open world people whizzing around on motorbikes, or am I getting completely confused?
yeah, you might be getting you're showing your age there again,
Yeah.
RetroMuel. No, Among Us is like a smartphone game where it's kind of like what there's a game called like Mafia or
Uh,
something like that where you have a bunch of people and it's like if you're alone with one person you can like assassinate them and then
right.
but like no one knows like there's like a detective and then there's like a secret mafia hitman and then there's like normal people and like you're trying to figure out who's who without anyone knowing each other's identities
Uh,
and it's kind of like that but they made it online
okay.
um
All right.
and
It's
that's
probably
really
not for
taken
me.
off and kids write the Among Us guy everywhere. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think they're so compared to something like Shenmue, like you were saying before about Call of Duty. Just the incentives there are so, it's just graphic violence. I think unfortunately humans have an attraction to it. You know what I mean? It's very hard to compete. Something a bit more slow paced and cerebral, like Skies of Arcadia or a Shenmue or something.
yeah,
Because
Shenmue's
you just
so
don't get that constant kind of feedback. You don't level up really. You don't. But
yeah.
it's not incentivized in the same way.
Right. Like some of these games, they try to appeal to your baser nature.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
hey, like let's
Yeah.
go shoot these things, or in Grand Theft Auto, hey, I can go get a hooker and then I can hit her with a bat and get my money back and then go run over a bunch of like nuns. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that's kind of fun, but like I mean, surely there's a place for a game that's more refined and cultured and elevated than that. That doesn't try to make you appeal to your baser nature, but it tries to help you find your hidden enlightened inner peace, inner self thing. I mean, I some people might think I'm giving too much credit. It's just a video game. How can a video game do that? But I think art can really, you can use aesthetics to appeal to the higher nature of a person and bring that out of them. And I think Shenmue definitely has a quality of that in it. So
Yeah, definitely. It kind of hits both. It's both a kung fu campy revenge story, but it's also there's a lot of kind of particularly in the second one, Taoism and Buddhism. All the different masters that Dio meets, and
yep.
there's some self-discovery in there. Definitely, it's not just a revenge story.
No, exactly. That's what I tell people a lot. It's actually a game. It looks like a revenge story, but it's really a game about transcending the need for revenge and learning
Mm,
to find joy and happiness amidst life's dissatisfactions by embracing the philosophies associated with martial arts. Now, obviously, martial arts aren't the only way you can learn to find inner peace and transcend your dissatisfaction and suffering in life, but it's this is Ryo's journey, and this is about how he used martial arts to accomplish that. And I just think that's so beautiful. And from these are all the themes of the game, but I mean from a gameplay perspective, I really enjoy the mundane gameplay of Shenmue, because I feel like the primary gameplay is all about exploring minutia and being rewarded for it. It's like, okay, you're in a place, you look around, and you see the game is, how can I be rewarded by looking around at stuff? And I
mm,
think Shenmue does that beautifully, and that's what makes it so cool. Is like you can be rewarded in a lot of different ways. You can be rewarded intrinsically just by taking in the beauty of your environment, or you can be rewarded extrinsically. You might find something, like you might find a cassette tape, you might find a move scroll, you might find a character, find a side quest, find a capsule toy. So all these different ways of rewarding the player for exploring minutia is really awesome to me.
yeah, it's beautifully designed, and it kind of unfolds. The more you put into it, the more you get out. Really, so many little details in the world. I think just the exploration for me was probably the biggest part of it. I'm thinking of Shenmue too, just the little things like there's a medicine cellar in South Car main quarter, I think. It's just a little girl outside a shop,
Hmm.
and then her grandfather's inside, and he's kind of smoking away. Um, and the detail inside the shop and everything. I mean, it's the work of a maniac, really. I mean, the obsessive kind of detail. You can tell there is a genius there. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Is it art? I don't know, but there's definitely a spark of genius, I think.
Certainly, it's that same spark that of genius that took the simplicity of the Virtua Fighter games and made it such a deep, satisfying experience. And that's another thing about Shenmue is I loved I loved how they utilized the Virtua Fighter engine. That's another reason why I think I prefer Shenmue 1 to all the other Shenmues, is I feel like it did have the best combat system. Um,
Hmm. How does it differ to the second one? I'm trying to.
yeah, well, in the second one, the dodge buttons is slightly different. It can make you roll to the side quite a bit.
Ah, okay, yeah,
And so it
yeah.
makes certain counters more difficult to pull off.
Uh,
And
okay.
so Shenmue 1 is more even keeled in that regard. Like you have these moves and you can level them up a certain way. But also I liked the way you could level up in Shenmue 1 a bit more. I like that you could go out in the parking lot and just train by yourself or train with Fukusan. It seemed like in Shenmue 2 it was just kind of like train with Jianmin. Um,
Yeah,
but there
yeah.
were more fights too, so maybe you didn't need to train as much. Um,
Yeah,
but
there's definitely a lot more fights. There's probably more variety in the second one. But
Yeah, there's more quantity, but I felt the quality was a bit more balanced and better in
mm,
Shenmue 1. Well, maybe balanced is the wrong word, because it's definitely like the combat's not like, it's not like Ryo isn't overpowered in Shenmue 1. He's very overpowered. Like that guard button is like ridiculous. You can counter so much stuff and do these huge combos to people, but it's broken like in a good way, like Street Fighter 2, like where you do these really insane combos and it's really fun. Um, Also in
mm,
Shenmue 2, they went. like with the Virtua Fighter 3 experimentation where they pull you into a first person view,
Oh yeah, yeah, that doesn't
on the
work.
docks. And yeah, and obviously there are more moves in Shenmue 2. Um,
I think the
but
combat. Sorry to interrupt.
no, you're not. You're not. Go ahead.
It's I don't know. It's I don't put it on quite the same tier as Virtua Fighter. Like I think Virtua Fighter is more kind of pure.
Hmm.
I find myself getting into the pattern of just tapping the parry button quite often to deflect attacks and then get the counter in. I
Yeah.
don't know. I think it works really well against single opponents, and it does. I'm not saying it's bad by any stretch. I think it's very good for the most part.
Hmm.
But I don't know. It kind of I can't quite target the enemy that I want to target at all times.
Yeah. That's true for both Shenmue 1 and 2. Um,
Yeah, yeah. It's I don't know if the system. I don't know how much they adapted it, but I don't think it works perfectly when you're dealing with multiple opponents.
that's a good point. I would
But
say
it's
also that, oh, just as an aside, and we can just leave it there if it's not something you want to latch onto, but I was thinking about the 70-man battle in Shenmue 1 was such a great moment. And I don't know that Shenmue 2 has a moment that fully replicates that quite as well to me, but
no, it doesn't, does it? No, there's no equivalent to that really. As you say, the fight with Do New Master Baihu as well. Is that his name?
yeah,
I
by who?
really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, that
Some
was a good
cool
one.
QTEs. Um, no, nothing's like that 70-man battle. That's what a moment.
Yeah. A moment that Yakuza likes to replicate quite a bit. And I think that's what makes people think of, oh, this is like Shenmue because I'm being attacked by 100 people at once. I'm walking through this mansion and being attacked by 20 guys at a time. Wow, that's like the 70-man battle in Shenmue. And superficially, yeah, it kind of is, but
Oh no, it's totally different. It's a different beast altogether. I think talking about the sense of place in Shenmue, contrast that with Yakuza, where you have random battles essentially when you're walking around the streets.
yeah,
Just takes me out of that place completely. I'm like,
right.
I don't feel like I'm in a living, breathing place as I
No,
do.
you're like a Looney Tune.
Yeah, it's kind of, and the storyline as well is really bombastic and kind of almost soap opera like at times, which is cool in its own way.
Mhm.
But the vibe is completely different
Exactly.
to
Yeah, that
Shenmue.
not comparable directly at all. I would say. So by the way, Shenmue 3 has been out for a couple of years now, and for better or worse. And I'd really love to hear some of your thoughts on the game and how it turned out. Some of your likes and dislikes.
Um, I think there's a lot to like about Shenmue 3. Although it's definitely more mixed than the first two for me. But I think the first area is fantastic, actually. Bailu Village and everything. For the most part, anyway, it feels like Shenmue. Um, I think they improved some of the systems in terms of the items you could get and the economy side of things. I thought it gave you more reason to actually go out and pick flowers,
Yeah,
or earn money and this, that, and the other. I thought it did probably a better job than the first two did
I think
in that
that
regard.
too. It Making money is way better in 3 than it was in 1 and 2. Would you agree?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would. I didn't have a great deal, particularly Shenmue 2. I didn't, outside of move scrolls and capsule toys, I suppose. There wasn't a great deal of point in that existing. It was great in and of itself, but it feels like
Yeah.
they found a more logical way to implement things in the third one. I thought they did really well
Mhm.
in that regard.
I mean, I think they still follow the same formula. Like before you can move the story progression on, you have to, or before you can progress the story, you have to give Ren $500. You know, like that kind of mechanic is still in there, using it as a gateway to progressing the story. It still has that function. Um, but I
Yeah,
think, go ahead.
I think I can understand why people might think that was a bit cheap, that kind of thing. But it was there in the second game as well.
And the first.
Yeah, was it in the first?
Yeah, because it was like, hey, you need this much money to get a plane ticket to
Oh,
Hong
of
Kong.
course, yeah,
Oh, I don't have
yeah,
enough. How much do I have? Oh, I have this much. I can get a boat. Oh, okay. Now I got ripped off. Okay, I guess I better get a job and get more money so I can afford the boat. It's like it's the same thing. It's the formula is very firmly in place in all three. It's very consistent across all three games.
yeah. So that didn't bug me at all. I thought the first area was really good for the most part. I mean, you could see here and there. Who was that company they got in to do some of the faces, the NPCs? Was it Laksha Digital or something like an Indian company? I think it was.
Oh,
You,
okay.
you could see, that discrepancy between the different character models. Some of them look super realistic,
Right.
and other ones look a lot more kind of caricatured. There's little mismatches like that here and there. But
Right.
I think you have to remember that the project was not exactly cobbled together, but I mean, they had a lot of.
It was a
I'm sure it was a
Kickstarter.
struggle. It was a Kickstarter, exactly. Yeah.
How many? There's been a lot of Kickstarted games. Don't get me wrong, but the typical Kickstarted game is like Shovel Knight, um, that Castlevania game. I forget what blood something.
Bloodstained.
Bloodstained. That's it. I have that game and I beat it. I quite like it. But these are like 2D retro style games, and like you know the only games that tried for like a 3D platformer were like Ukulele,
Yeah.
and like that was a bit overambitious to kickstart a 3D platformer. And then you go past that and it's like now we're going to kickstart a 3D open world game. Like what the heck was Kickstarter even intended with for that? I would argue no, but they pulled it off better than they had any right to, in my opinion.
Yeah, they achieved a lot with that game, and I don't think Yu Suzuki at least was even familiar with. Is it Unreal Engine 4 they're using?
Yeah.
So I mean, a huge amount to get done in that space of time. I think for the most part, I think Naiwu is that how you pronounce it? It starts.
Niawu is what I say, but I don't know if it's right.
Yeah, yeah. I think there it starts to look a little bit ragged in parts. The story is
Yeah.
a bit rushed.
And empty.
Um, yeah, that's the main thing for me. Actually, the whole game, if I had to reduce it to one thing, I didn't like that the streets were so empty in that city. I mean, that sounds silly, but in terms of the sense of place, it being in a populated city that the first two games did so well, I thought
Well,
the
and
third
I
one
think
struggled.
yeah, definitely. And I think that it tried to Shenmue 3 tried to cater to both fans of Shenmue 1 and 2. They made Bailu Village try to feel like Shenmue 1, and they made Niaowu
Mm,
try to feel like Shenmue 2, like you're in
mm,
Wanzai or something.
mm,
Um, and some of the stuff in Niaowu I prefer over Bailu Village.
mm.
I thought it was really fun to chase the thugs and do the quick time events and stuff like that. That was really fun. Jump across the boats and get hit by a 2x4 and like it was just funny.
Oh yeah, of
There's like a
course.
girl up on a ladder and if you don't catch her, like you face plant, but she like does a flip and does a kung fu pose, and you're like, whoa, like
Speaking of which, I think I failed every single QTE in the game, at least the first time.
something was wrong with the QTEs in that. Like
Yeah, I think there was something going on there. Yeah.
yeah, the timing was not the same. It didn't feel like the timing was as I mean the QTEs were always challenging in Shenmue 1 and 2, but in 3 they felt like almost impossible. And they got a little bit better with a patch, but I don't
Mm.
think they were able to balance the QTEs to make it feel to I don't know, it just didn't feel quite right. Like there was a quality to the QTEs that was like a very arcade reaction feel to it that it felt tough but fair.
Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on there. I kept trying to tell myself that it was just because I wasn't as used to the PlayStation icons coming up, whether it was X or circle. At first, I thought it must just be me, but I don't
Yeah.
think it was. I think they don't beep in the same way that they do on the Dreamcast. Is that right?
Yeah.
It was just so clear that press this right now, in the first two games. But I also think the timing, whether there's a huge amount of input lag or something on that game, I don't know.
Maybe
Something's
it's the
wrong with it, I
PS4
think.
controller. I know that the PS4 is pretty. Like when Tekken 7 came out, a lot of people were complaining about input lag on the PS4 DualShock controller. And I often wondered if that was part of the reason why the QTEs were a little hacky, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things. Like it was lacking in a bit of polish as a whole, I guess, Shenmue 3, but I mean that's to be expected, isn't it? You know, it's as you say, it's a Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's the Kickstarter. It was faithful to Shenmue 3, but every aspect of it was diminished. Like, hey,
Mm.
like look, like here's all NPCs, you can talk to them. Yes, but it wasn't done quite as well. Okay, here's the combat system. Okay, that wasn't done as well. All right, here's the QTEs. Yeah, that wasn't really done as well either.
Mm.
I was thinking about the QTEs. I enjoyed the QTEs in Shenmue 3. Like they made me laugh. Like I loved failing them, just to see what would happen. Like when the guy's taking a pee and Rio goes up to try to punch him and he misses, and like they both just like look down at his wiener together and then look at each other and he gets punched in the face. Like that's
Oh,
hilarious. Like
I
some of
missed
them
that one.
were. You missed that one?
I'm gonna have to go back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like he's like going pee, and then Rio tries to punch him and he misses, and then he turns around and he's just like, it doesn't show it, of course. You can't he can't do that, but it implies that they both look down, and he's like,
Yeah.
dude, what are you looking at? And like punches Rio in the face, and it's just hilarious. It's hysterical.
Yeah. There's a
Um,
couple of penis jokes actually, because I was thinking of the handcuffs. I just in Shenmue 2,
yeah.
where they're handcuffed together and Ren needs to take a leak, you
Oh
know,
yeah, and he's
and
like,
he
no, you're
I
not
love
gonna
that
have my
bit.
hand close there. It's like
Yeah, and he's like, oh man, you know.
I could see Ren being like, "Hey, can you help me shake?" Or like.
Yeah.
Now, see, now we're
Uh,
into the really cultured part of the podcast, the dick jokes.
yeah.
This is what put
Yeah.
Shenmue 3 over the top, and the Shenmue series as a whole, I would
Yeah.
say.
Gonna drag the tone down a couple of notches.
No, it's okay. But here's the thing: the charm is still there in the combat. Okay, the execution of the combat maybe isn't as good, and we can talk about that more later. But I thought the training was quite well done. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
I like making money better in Shenmue 3 than any other game. Um, I still enjoyed the characters and thought many of them were charming, even though not quite as many. I thought the QTEs were still charming in places, but do you remember in Shenmue 1 when you're driving your forklift and this not Hell's Angels, oh shoot, what are they called? Mad Angels.
Mad
The
Angels.
Mad
Yeah.
Angels guy, he comes and he lays on your forklift and you're like, hey, get off. And he's like, nope, just give me a ride. So you're like, fine, whatever. You give him a
Yeah.
ride into a warehouse and you get jumped by all these dudes and you beat them up. And then later on, you do this QTE thing where that one guy in the purple shirt is like the last guy in the chain of QTEs. And depending on how you go through that, depending on how many people hit you, there's like this flow chart of like, if you get hit, then you'll do this move. And then if you get here, you can react this way. And if you don't get hit, you'll do this. And you can go through so many different branching paths of that QTE battle in that warehouse and see a different flourish against the final guy in the purple shirt. Um, that really made it like, wow, that was so cool. Like you can beat him with a double blow, or you can like do like I forget what it was. Maybe he did like a spinning back fist to him or something like that. Um, or like
Yeah.
I know I'm rambling here, but Shenmue 2 had that amazing cutscene right at the beginning with Wong, where
Hmm.
you chase him, and if you keep failing to catch the kid, um, he'll do different things like, oh yeah, I bought some ice cream with his money, and he's like giving his friends ice cream, and you wouldn't see that if you didn't keep failing the QTEs,
Mm.
or
Yeah.
if
It's so much work
Mhm.
behind the scenes there that you're probably never going to see, but it's part of the charm of Shenmue, isn't it? You know, the too good for its own good, in a sense.
Yeah, because it's something that you have to really dig in and like sink your teeth into and digest it slowly to appreciate it. But then when you do, you're like, wow, this is really high quality. But it's not something that is like instant, like super fast, instant gratification. I ran over like somebody in my car and then shot all these people like in a public square or something. Like, it's
Yeah.
definitely a bit more. I don't
It's
know.
hard to compete with that kind of thing, isn't it? Just instant gratification,
Hmm.
you know.
Well, I mean, it's always been that way, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it to do that. But I really think that's why Shenmue to this day had the best QTEs of any video game ever.
Yeah, yeah. I can't think of anything. The one that stands out to me is probably is it Thousand White Quarter? I can't remember the place with the food market stalls
Oh yeah.
where you go
Mhm.
there at night and you just beat 10 or 15 guys. Someone throws a melon at you at one point.
Yeah, yeah. And if you get
Absolutely
hit
superb, yeah.
and if you fail and succeed in different areas, you'll do different moves.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd love to see the flow chart they came up with. It must have been some whiteboard, when they were planning the thing. To be
Yeah.
like 12 feet high or something. Incredibly complex. And I guess they had to do all the motion capture for it. And
Right. And the QTEs in Shenmue 3 are more linear. It's like no pass fail, that's it. You can see if one fail, you can see one success, and that's all. And so that was a bit disappointing for me.
mm,
But it didn't ruin the experience for me. I just realized, okay, like here's what they were able to do. Like here's all the things that make a Shenmue game what it is, and here's how much of it they were able to do. They were able to do like 60% of the potential for the QTEs and 50% of the potential for the combat and 60% for the environments and whatever. Um,
yeah, I mean, it was always going to be that way, wasn't it? I think,
yeah.
didn't you himself say that he gave it a 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 or something, which I think
Oh,
for me, but as you said earlier, the key
even
to
more.
it is that the charm's there. That's the most important thing for
Uh,
me.
I
The
would give
vibe's
it
there.
I would give it like a 7.5.
Hmm.
Um, and I like
Yeah.
a lot of games that are 7.5s. I like a lot of games that are sevens. Heck, I really like Devil's Third, and that game was like a 4. Well, I wouldn't call it
Devil's
a 4. I'd
Third.
call Devil's Third a 7, but
I don't think I
um,
played that one.
you don't? Oh, well, that was on the Wii U, so not many did. It was a very
Oh
rare.
no, I missed that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Um,
saga.
that was the guy who made Dead or Alive made that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Tomonobu Itagaki made that.
Oh, cool.
But what I'm saying is Shenmue 1 and 2 were masterpieces, and Shenmue 3 is not a masterpiece, but it is a good game.
Yeah,
And
it's
and
a good
so
game.
if you're at 60% of a masterpiece, you're really good. You're actually quite a good, decent game. And that's what we got. And how can we expect anything more from someone? It's not really fair to expect a masterpiece from someone. All you can
Mm.
really ask for is a good game, and that is what was delivered.
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful as well. Shenmue 3. It's absolutely the environments are gorgeous.
Hmm.
Um, that's as you say, the charm is there, the feels are there. Some of the things they definitely did improve. It just shows it's not necessarily budgetary limitations, but I think assembling the whole team, getting used to a new engine, bringing in
Yeah,
different companies, different finances coming from different sources, this, that, and the other. It does show in parts, but overall, it's a good game, as you say.
yeah. Well, and I mean, Yu Suzuki he's like coming out of like quasi retirement almost. Like hasn't made a
Mm,
game in 20 years.
it's a long time, yeah.
And then just expect somebody to not be rusty or like I'm not saying he was rusty on this, but I just mean having stepped away for that long and to create a game at this high of a level is quite impressive, and he has not lost his touch. um
No, no, he knows what he wants to do, definitely. And I mean, one of the criticisms was like he's just ignored the last 20 years of games development and advancements and all this kind of thing. But as I understand it, he doesn't actually play games. He doesn't have a lot of time for them. He likes
right.
making them. And that's exactly what I want from him. I don't even care necessarily whether Shenmue is a good game, inverted commas, or not.
Mm,
Shenmue to me is Shenmue. It's his own thing. It's an experience. Um,
sure.
it's a
It's
great product one way or another. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
certainly a
main
great
thing.
product. Certainly a great product. And sorry, I didn't mean to. I feel like I keep accidentally talking over you. I apologize, but I just wanted to say that I feel like it's unfair to criticize Shenmue 3 for not quote unquote learning from the past 20 years of game development, because I feel like they look at it and the visuals are so good that they think, oh, this is a modern game now. but it's not a modern game. This is a retro game. It's a kickstarted game. That would be like, look at Shovel Knight. It's still 2D platformer. It hasn't learned anything from the last 35 years of game development. It's still doing the same stuff that was done during the NES era. And it's like, yeah, that's the point. It's a throwback. This is a Dreamcast game. It's for people who like Dreamcast games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that it was for fans. Why are you acting like it had to have mass appeal? It was it tried to cater to the mass market as much as it could, but the priority was always to fans of the Dreamcast era.
Yeah, of course. We wanted to see the story return, we wanted to see it advance a little bit. And I mean, to be fair, I think a lot of the advancements they've made in open world games, at least, have been, at best, sideways steps for me anyway. It's not necessarily it has this enormous open world, therefore it's better.
Right.
What I like to see, particularly in the first village, was, it's a smaller, more contained, but definitely is a more kind of intimate place with lots of stuff to do. Unique NPCs everywhere. You get to see people's daily routines. You get to see all these little details. You get to see them doing their jobs in the day and going out and gambling at night, etc., etc.
Yeah.
That's still not something that you get from these big open world games, in my opinion. And that's fine if you prefer the big open world. But my point is, it's two different things, basically. So if you don't like it, that's fine. But at least,
Yeah, at least recognize the quality of what it is.
yeah,
What it like appreciate what it's trying to do and judge it based on how well did it achieve its goal.
mm.
Don't judge it based on if you agree with its goal. Judge it on the
Mm-hmm.
merits of what was it trying to be and how well did it execute that. It's trying to be a Shenmue game, and it did a good job of that. As you say, with open world games, they've taken sideways steps. They emphasize improving the breadth of open worlds rather than the depth. I feel
Yeah.
like Shenmue has always tried to use open world games to reward the player, as I said earlier, by exploring minutia. And I think Shenmue 3 still accomplishes that. Like when you go out and explore, and in some ways it's greatly improved. Like you go out, you explore mini games, and in Shenmue 2 it was like, oh, you can play Lucky Hit just to make money and win a couple capsule toys and that's it. But in Shenmue 3 it's like, if I want to get stronger, I have to find a new kung fu move and train that. That's the only way to boost my attack power. And then you're walking along and you see like a carnival game, and the prize is a new move scroll that you don't have. And you
Mm.
can either spend 800 yuan or yuan or however they say it on a new move scroll, or you can spend like 100 yuan on trying to get this mini game move scroll.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that hit me. Was a lot of these systems actually they've improved them definitely
Mhm.
over the second game. Because I never really got into that stuff so much. I got into the move scrolls in Shenmue 2. I've never been a huge collect everything person in games. Shenmue 2 is probably an exception where I've never done all the capsule toys, for example, but I did do the bird race or the duck race. Sorry.
The duck race, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. I've only done it once, I think, when I was about 22 or something. But
That's
but
awesome.
for me there wasn't much beyond that. You could get those move scrolls. I'm probably missing a couple of examples, but in Shenmue 2, it all made more sense. The sort of economy of that little town was
Sure.
very consistent. It all had a purpose. That was
Yeah,
really good, really good.
definitely. Like, I mean, I don't mean to keep beating this drum and going on, but I love how if you go out and you explore the visuals of Shenmue 3 in Bailu and in Niaowu, it's like there's incentive there because not only is it really pretty to look at, but you might find an herb,
Hmm. Yeah,
or you
exactly.
might,
Yeah.
yeah, and or you might find a really cool fishing spot, or you might find somewhere to train that's more convenient for you. And I think even though Shenmue 3 is the weakest of the series so far, I do find it the most addicting. Like
Hmm.
when I get in the mood to play a new Shenmue, this is weird to say because my favorite Shenmue is Shenmue 1, and then after that it's Shenmue 2. It's a close second, and then 3 is quite a bit lower on my totem pole, but I always get an itch to play 3. Whenever I want to play Shenmue, I go for 3 because I just get hooked into the economy.
Yeah, it's really good. It's one of the things with the to change the subject slightly. Shenmue 3, I think it doesn't run that well even now on a PS4 Pro. It's something like I wish they'd locked the frame rate. I'm not as a kid I wouldn't have given a shit at all about this, but
Yeah.
as I've probably watching too many Digital Foundry videos, But yeah, the uneven frame rate, I wish they'd locked it at 30 because it's inconsistent. It always on PS4 Pro anyway, it runs at like 46 frames per second or something, and it's quite kind of uneven. So
Right.
that probably could have been sorted out with a patch. But then I wanted to play it on the PC, but I've only got like an RX 480, so it absolutely you could fry an egg on it basically when it's
Yeah.
running at 1440p or whatever. So I ended up finishing it on the PS4, but I still, when this drought or whatever you want to call it of GPUs goes away, I'll pick up a more expensive card and I want to run it with all the bells and whistles. I don't know if you know, on the Shenmue Dojo, there's a guy who makes patches for these things, and he's you can increase the number of NPCs for a start. Yeah.
On
So
Steam or?
yes, or it's on Steam and it's on. Is it Epic Games as well?
Okay, you can do
I
patch. You
think it
can
works
do.
on both. Yeah, there's a guy called Lemon Haze, something or
Yes,
other.
I'm familiar with Lemon Haze. I mean, I haven't talked to him personally, but I've corresponded with him indirectly through some of his buddies, and yeah, he does pretty amazing stuff with that.
Yeah, so I did try increasing the NPCs, but it does take quite a beefy machine. I think that's the main reason why they did it. Why there were so few NPCs in Naiwu, because it just would have melted the PS4 basically.
Right.
But yeah, I want to return to it again, definitely.
Right. How did you feel about the combat?
I I think there's a good system in there, but I think it was underdeveloped again, probably for the same reasons. They were.
Yeah.
It's a tough ask for a kickstarted game, but I think there's a good system underneath. The throws are a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, there's no throws. That's the thing. I feel
Yeah,
like it's not complete. I feel like it's just unfinished. They're like, here you go. Here's we got this far, and we had to stop.
yeah. I don't think the game was finished
Right.
quite. I would say it was probably 75% or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's why I feel like it's a 7.5 game, to be honest. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
it definitely did not reach its full potential, which is a bit disappointing. But if it's unfinished, of course it's not going to.
yeah. Of course. And I mean, how much longer could they go on for? People were getting impatient at that point. It could have easily taken a decade. I think if you'd let Yu Suzuki just go on, we probably would have been here for 10 or 15 years. I mean, I would love to see that game. But I think who's the Yakuza guy? Is it Nagoshi, the
Uh,
Japanese, the main
I'm
guy?
not familiar with them, but
Dresses like a Yakuza. The guy who made it. He was there in the Daytona days and
oh, okay.
one of the inside guys at Sega. I think he was kind of brought onto the project at one point, and he kind of had to politely tell you to, we're going to have to cut
Hurry
this
up.
project off at this point, and get it
Right.
finished. And the guy is just, as I say, I think he's a genius. I really do. But
I feel like Shenmue 3 tried to be Shenmue 3, 4, and 5 all together. Maybe just Shenmue 3 and 4, actually, because I feel like Bailu was going to be one game. Like just the Bailu part, I feel like that was Shenmue 3 and Niao Wu was Shenmue 4.
yeah, I don't know if they got caught in two minds as such, but I think they were trying to give you Shenmue, but also advance the story. I don't think they quite uh, managed to draw a line through those two things.
Yeah.
Kind of. I would have been happier probably if they'd just told a smaller story. I'm happy with having little to no plot advancement. To be honest, it doesn't bother me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that was the next thing I wanted to kind of ask you about. Oh, but before we segue into that, I was going to mention that the departure of Shenmue from the Virtua Fighter combat engine.
Mhm.
What did you think about that?
Yeah, I would definitely preferred the older system, but I think I would like to see what the new combat system has to offer if it had the budget and the time and whatever else it needed to do its thing. Because I think there's some interesting elements in there.
You know, I had one friend play Shenmue 1, and I noticed when he played all the way through it, and towards the end, all he would push was kick, kick, kick. That was the only combo he would do. He never used a single throw the whole time.
Right.
And I had another friend who played Shenmue 2, and you know how they changed your punching combos? Because in Shenmue 1, you do like this really long string of punches. Like you'd go through almost every punch he could do and then end it with an elbow assault. But in Shenmue 2, you would go 1, 2, 3, like punch, punch, punch. And my friend beat Don Yu just doing that combo over and over, and he never did
Really?
anything fancy or flashy once. I mean, it's a huge, it is a huge, deep combat system with all these different options, a huge amount of complexity, and he only used 1% of it for the whole entire game. And so I feel like with Shenmue 3, most people who are casual, I've said this before in another podcast, but I feel like most casual players actually think Shenmue 3's combat is better because if they just sit and push the same button over and over, they will actually do different moves. And they're more encouraged to button mash, and so they feel like they're using more of the library of moves.
Yeah, I have to say I was a bit disappointed with the combat in Shenmue 3 because he was kind of talking up this new system that he was figuring out for Shenmue 3, and when it came to the crunch, it was kind of not all that great.
It was a Kickstarter goal. It was like improved combat, and we were like, "Oh, we got to get that," and we barely reached it. We barely reached that Kickstarter goal, and we were all
Did we
like,
actually reach it in the end? I thought we didn't. You're
"No, we
probably
did."
right.
In the Slacker backer, we did reach that goal.
Okay.
And so we were like super pumped, like, "Oh yeah, it's going to be even better." And then it was not better. It was worse. But
No, I did think it was pretty poor at first. I got into it a little bit more as the game went on, but I don't think I think it's a big part of Shenmue, of course, but I don't think it's the most important aspect. To be honest, I think
true.
it has to serve the story and it's got a job to do,
Yeah,
But like
definitely.
I don't think it's as good as Virtua Fighter's combat, which is just absolutely pristine. I mean, you can't really fault.
To me, Virtua Fighter is the greatest combat system ever created. So how could you be better than the best? Like, of course, you're
Well,
going to fall short of that.
yeah, of course, but it's a system that works well in the first two games. The third one is I don't know, perhaps if you'd had more time with it, it would have
Yeah.
worked out better. But
When you train and get your moves a lot stronger and you get your attack power up, it's really quite fun because you can crumple people, you can ring them out, you can do these combos on people that are like your own combos. Like you can crumple them and then jump up and like keep hitting them and staggering them. And I really love that you can toggle between different opponents a lot easier in Shenmue 3. That's something the
yeah,
combat actually does do better than 1 and 2.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not worse in all regards.
yeah. No, that is an issue definitely with just having played Shenmue 2 through recently, trying to target the guy that you want to target
Right.
doesn't really work, But the third game
Right.
did at least have a
And the
system
slow
for that.
motion stuff when you have low health and you do a slow motion move that looks so cool. There's so much potential with that. I want to see them develop it more.
Yeah, that's my overall feeling with Shenmue 3, really. I think there's a good foundation there, they achieved a lot with it. I suppose the challenge is keeping the development team more or less together, if it goes on, it's okay for a couple of years maybe, but if it goes on to a decade and then they're having to reassemble a whole new team, probably work with a different graphics engine,
Right.
then we might have the same kind of teething problems that we had with this one. I don't know. So I would hope that they are able to continue, kind of get on a roll with it because, yeah, if they iron out this, that, and the other, they manage to polish things up, they get the sort of story pacing a little bit improved, then I think you could look forward to Shenmue 4, definitely. But who
Oh,
knows
for
if it's
sure.
ever going to see the light of day? I don't know.
Well, that's something we need to talk about too. But you mentioned earlier that the minuscule. I don't want to say that I don't want to say minuscule story progression, but Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
the minimalist, the
Yeah.
minimal story progression. I think it progressed as much as it needed to, but a lot of people wanted to see the series wrap up with three. They were treating it like a trilogy, which I don't think any serious fan really thought was going to happen. Um,
No.
but you
No.
mentioned that as much like how much of the story progressed, that wasn't an issue for you, I guess. And I thought, could you expound a little more on that point?
Yeah, I mean, Shenmue is about the journey to me more than anything else. I mean, anyone who's waited for 20 years to see a sequel, you
Hmm.
know, um, I think there were little, particularly in Bailu, what's the scene where they go to the temple and they learn a little bit more about Dio's dad and Landi's dad and their relationship. That kind of stuff was intriguing. I don't remember a huge amount in Naiwu. What actually happens in Naiwu?
In
Trying to,
Niao Wu, he learns the reverse body check. He fights the red snakes. He meets the temple girl. Um, he
yeah,
Shenhua gets captured. He meets up with Ren. Uh,
yeah. I think the story is probably quite front loaded in Shenmue 3. I suppose most of the actual exposition happens in Bailu Village.
yeah,
I
and
think,
especially I feel like a lot of the story is your relationship with Shenhua. And
yeah,
in Bailu, you
definitely.
spend a lot of time getting to know her, and that's a huge amount of story progression. Just like learning
Mm,
or sorry, filling in all the questions about her.
mm,
Like a lot of people are like, I want to know about what's going to happen with Landi. Well, I feel like Suzuki was like, no, what you should be worried about is what's up with Shenhua, and
mm.
and so you learn quite a bit about her.
Yeah, I think all in all, perhaps they should have just. I can understand them wanting to do, the Naiwu part almost feels like a celebration of Shenmue in a sense. They bring back the old characters.
Yeah,
They drop Landy in there at the end,
it's a victory lap.
which I could have done without personally. But
Hmm,
I
interesting.
can understand totally you're offering this product and people want to see Landy, they want to see Ren. Um, I
Right.
think it does most of its storytelling in that first section. But
And
I
Chai
love this.
too. They bring Chai back. It's like, whoa.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, yeah. It does have a little bit of when they bring a sitcom back for a one-off special or something like that, and they they wheel in the previous stars.
Yeah, quite a
And
bit
it's
of
not
fan
quite,
service.
yeah, which I can forgive some of it, but perhaps they should have focused more on the Bailu village part of it, if it was me anyway,
Hmm,
and just cut it off there and kind of refine things more and cover less
interesting.
ground. But
Yeah, most people I
at,
know
at,
prefer the Niao Wu section to the Bailu, so that's an interesting point of
okay,
view. That's interesting to hear.
well, yeah, I get that. It just I don't know that a great deal happens there somehow. My biggest problem was that there weren't enough NPCs. So
Hmm. Hmm. It doesn't feel. Yeah, I feel like Bailu pulls off the Shenmue 1 vibe better than Niao Wu pulls off the Shenmue 2 vibe.
yeah, yeah, I think that's fair. Um, Landy felt a bit shoehorned in at the end, but again, what are they going to do? People expect a climax
Yeah,
of
they do,
sorts.
and
So
and I think that's I don't know. I liked that Landy was there, but my problem is a lot of people, especially Western people, they think that Shenmue is supposed to be a three-act play because
mm,
that's how we tell stories in the West. But it's not a Western story; it's an Eastern story. It's a
mm,
lot like Journey to the West. I mean, Rio is literally journeying west, and he's
mm,
trying to transcend his need for revenge, just like the Monkey King Wukong is trying to transcend his more primal natures and following the path of the Buddha.
hmm
Um, and I think a lot of people feel like in Shenmue 3, everything's come full circle. You're kind of like right back to where you started because if you think about it, the way Shenmue 1 starts is Lan rolls up, he beats you down and takes your mirror. And then you're like, I got to go get him. And the way Shenmue 3 ends is you roll up on Lan he beats you down, you lose another mirror, and now you're
mm.
chasing Lan again with no leads. Um, so it's come full circle. But I actually think that's really good because it's not supposed to see. Ryo hasn't transcended his need for revenge yet. And I mean, even I don't know if you remember this, but in Shenmue 3, Shenhua tries to talk to him about it. Like she just touches that once. She sees that agony, that how much he's suffering with his anger and hatred for Lan Di because of what happened to his father and that loss and his grief. And she puts one finger on it. She touches it and says, like, hey, like, you shouldn't really waste your life on revenge. Don't you think there's better things to live for? And Ryo gets super pissed off at her and won't talk to her for the rest of the night. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you saw that. And she gets sad, and he's just like, no. And he's like, Ryo gets mad at her because she tries to tell him, hey, you need to let go of this. And he's like, no, I'm not going to let go of my suffering. Basically, I'm going to hold on to my suffering because I want to make Lan Di suffer like I am suffering.
Yeah, he's still burning with rage. Yeah.
Right. And they call that cycle of suffering, they call it samsara, right? So
Mm.
it's the
Mm-hmm.
idea that you're in a futile Sisyphusian,
Mm-hmm.
endless cycle of suffering, and you never get out of it. You're just spinning your wheels. And at the end of Shenmue 3, he hasn't listened to anyone about transcending his need for revenge, and he's right back to where he started, and he's suffering just as much as he always has, and he's suffering just as much as Lan Di. He's not like the ending of Shenmue 3 isn't satisfying, but I think that's what's great about it. It's not satisfying because samsara is your dissatisfaction with life.
Mm-hmm.
And Ryo is just as dissatisfied with his life by seeking revenge as Lan Di is with his own. Like, does Lan Di look happy to you by the end of Shenmue 3?
No, no, he's not a happy man.
No,
It's
he
fair
got
to
his
say.
revenge. He killed Iwao. He did all the stuff he wanted to do, and he's just as empty as he's always been. And Ryo is following in Lan Di's footsteps.
Yeah, I mean it's clear, isn't it? If you play the games, you can see that they're kind of mirroring each other. Landy and Dio. I think I've heard you say that at some point, Landy is not going to be the enemy anymore. They're going to see that they've got all these things in common. In a sort of Luke Skywalker faces himself in the swamp type
Yeah.
vibe.
Yep.
I think Shenmue 3, it was always going to be a smaller chapter. I think it was planned that way. It was going to be a relatively quiet, at least the Bailu section, where Dio was going to focus on his training. Um, he's going to find out a little more about his dad and what he was doing in China. And I think it was the bigger chapters are yet to come. The journey continues after he meets Lan Di,
Right.
and they wander off to the next place. I don't really have any issues at all, to be honest, with the story progression.
No, I don't either. I think that what's happening is it's an Eastern story, and either he has completed his cycle of samsara or he is almost complete with it. Like he's eventually he's going to run around in circles enough to realize he's just doing the same thing over and over and not getting anywhere, and then he's
Mhm.
going to break out of it. And when he defeats Lan Di, it will be to protect the innocent and not to satisfy his own base desires. And
Yeah. Do you
I'm
think there's
very
going to be
excited.
another kind of big bad coming out? I'm wondering whether Lan Di eventually kind of chills out.
I could see them fight and Rio defeat Lan Di, and then I could see a redemption arc for Lan Di. I could see them working together. I mean, heck, like maybe they'll summon that Chiomen demon and then they work together to fight it. Who knows if they want to go with this, if they want to go way balls to the wall on the supernatural part of that element of Shenmue. I doubt that they might put that much of an emphasis on it. But I think there are so many things. If you look at Virtua Fighter, I mean, you've got Lei Fei, the evil monk. We
Hmm.
haven't seen an evil monk yet for Rio to fight. You've got other members of the Chiyu Men, right? You've got Landy, you've got the Phoenix Lady, and then there's two other members we haven't met yet. So those are a
Hmm.
couple big bads we could fight.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, the best is yet to come. I think
yeah,
definitely. Don't have any issues. The bit with Shenhua where she seems to show almost as if she's got some paranormal powers or something. She does something weird to the guy, the muscle bound dude in Bailu.
yeah, she does. She actually does it a few times. Do you notice?
Okay.
With
Just the
Chai.
once. Oh, does
Oh,
she?
oh, I was playing through it again when she's when remember when Chai comes and he takes that map from you in Bailu?
Yeah.
And then she like looks at him and her eyes get that look that
Mm.
it's that same like cold stare. And she goes, "You won't fight Rio because you're a coward." And he's like, and he stops running
Oh, of
away.
course. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
she
do
pulls him
remember.
back in to fight Rio and he beats him up.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
do.
like you
She's,
said, she does it to that big thug.
yeah.
And then with Ren, he's like, "Who's the babe?" And then she gives him that cold stare and he's like, never mind. I'm not gonna make a sexual object of you. It's like,
Yeah.
what? She's doing something.
Yeah. It's intriguing, you know. I've seen
Yeah.
some of the theories that she might be a reincarnation of some ancient Chinese princess or something like that. You know, who knows?
Well, I mean, that's the thing is the reincarnation theme is part of samsara, the cycle of suffering, because you die and you're reborn and you're repeating the same stuff with your dissatisfaction. Like I said, this is an Eastern story, so I could see that happening. Um,
Mm,
that
absolutely.
that principle, and I think that it's definitely. I mean, even Shenhua tells you like, yeah, I talk to animals, and Rio's like, what? But it's supernatural in a way that uh, I don't know. We call it supernatural, but
Mm,
maybe we shouldn't call it that. Maybe it's just natural because what it is she has tapped into living in harmony with nature to a
mm,
degree that other people normally don't, but they have the potential to do.
mm. The
And living in
force,
harmony with
almost.
nature is what Chinese philosophy is all about.
Hmm.
And that's what will help Rio learn to transcend his need for revenge and suffering.
Yeah, she's definitely they're kind of yin and yang, aren't they?
Hmm.
Shenhua and Dio.
Yeah, she's the goddess archetype in mythological storytelling. She's his feminine side. She's the embodiment of wisdom. I don't know if you people might not read the Bible, but the Bible. I think it's in Proverbs. It talks about like God created wisdom as his first creation or something, and she's a woman, and so like a lot of times in mythology you'll have goddess archetypes and just women. Like the femininity is the embodiment of wisdom and learning to um, find your true purpose in life, and that's what
Hmm.
she is for Rio. She serves that purpose, and he should embrace the gifts that she has to offer him, and that's what he's kind of learning to do. So she's his salvation in a lot of ways.
Yeah, sure. I could see her being the one that defeats Lundy in some way, ultimately, rather than Dio. I don't know
Oh,
whether it's going to be just a pure combat situation. Something's going to shift anyway, I'm sure.
well,
Um,
have you ever heard of Prince Five Weapons?
no.
It's it's an Eastern myth about this prince who he goes off to become a warrior and he masters the art of the five weapons better than
Mm.
anyone in the whole world. And so his master gives him five weapons and calls him. He's like, "You are now Prince Five Weapons. Go out in the world and conquer and whatever." So he does, and he goes to this forest, and people are like, "Don't go in the forest. There's a demon in there. We call this demon Sticky Hair." And he eats people and he'll kill you and eat you too. Don't go in there. And he's like, I'm Prince Five Weapons. I can take him out. So he confronts the demon. He uses his five weapons on the demon. All five of the weapons just stick to the demon's hair and don't kill him. So then the prince is like, well, I'm not afraid of you. And he punches the demon with his right hand and his right hand gets stuck in the hair. And then he punches the demon with his left hand and his left hand gets stuck. And he's like, well, I still have my feet. So he kicks the demon with both of his feet and they both get stuck. And the demon's like, what are you going to do now? And Prince Five Weapons says, I will headbutt you and grind you into powder with my head. I'll beat you to death with my own skull, basically. And he headbutts the sticky hair, and guess what? His head gets stuck, right? And the demon's like, look, I mean, like, I'm not going to say, like, you're tough, but you're really not afraid of dying. And why is that? And Prince Five Weapons says, I'm not afraid to die because I have a thunderbolt in my belly. And if you eat me, the thunderbolt will destroy you and me. So I know I can't lose. And the demon gets afraid of him when he realizes he has the thunderbolt in his belly. And so he lets him go. And then Prince Five Weapons teaches the demon to repent. And the demon changes from a demon into a guardian spirit that protects people in the forest. So he redeems uh,
Mm.
Sticky Hair. And so I think that, and by the way, the five weapons are like your five senses. And so
Okay.
your appetite for your five senses is what you're always trying to fulfill. And the more you try to appease those appetites, the more you get stuck to the demon sticky hair, which is death, and the more
Mhm.
miserable you are. And when you learn to let go of that and have the knowledge that happiness does not come from your appetites, from your five senses, it doesn't come from fulfilling your appetite for revenge, um, then you can transcend death and change death into a friend rather than a foe.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels there, definitely.
Yeah.
I
And
think
so I've,
you,
yeah, go ahead.
he seems pretty steeped in Chinese culture, doesn't he? So
Hmm.
definitely wouldn't surprise me if he's weaving a lot of these things into the story.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it's just Yu Suzuki is culturally Japanese, and he's ethnically and nationally that as well. But you can't help but see things through that prism if that's what you're born into.
Mm,
And so I think that's part of the mystique of Shenmue for us Westerners is we're learning about this approach to life from a different point of view that's really helpful to us. So um,
absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of substance in this story. Just beyond a simple revenge story.
Totally, totally. I think that's where I was going with that. I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of forgot why I was telling that story in the first place.
So I
But
enjoy.
thank
Was
you
that
for
a
being
Japanese
reminded.
story? Sorry, or Chinese?
Um, I mean, I don't know if it's Chinese. It might be Indian, but
Oh,
I
okay.
mean,
All
to be
right.
honest, a lot of that stuff is diffused all over the place. I mean, like even Shintoism is like Japanese Buddhism in a lot of ways. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Confucianism started in China, but it's very popular in Japan, and so it's all, I would call it just Eastern. They
Yeah.
all kind of share that.
They're
Um,
quite compatible with one another, aren't they, as well? Which
yeah,
Buddhism can coexist with Shinto and Tao, and it's
right.
not like you drop, Judaism in with Islam or something like that. They don't go together so easily. But
Right. Well, and there's three philosophies. The big ones are Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. And I think the idea is maybe it's in Japan, it's something like, because Shintoism is kind of like it uses a lot of Confucianism, but also some Buddhism too. Um, but the idea is you're born Shinto, and then you become Buddhist, and then you die like a Taoist or something like that. Like these aren't
okay.
like different religions that you only have to stick to one. It's like it's a process you go through, and you kind of like embody all three or something like that. But
Mm, mm,
and you could see Rio going through this because you definitely see a lot of these different Eastern motifs with this mythology happening, and that's really meaningful and fun for me to see. So that's why I really want this impossible dream, as you put it so eloquently, to continue. And I kind of want to talk about our thoughts on the future of Shenmue, such as the Shenmue 4. How do you feel about that happening? Are you feeling optimistic or unsure?
I really want to see it, whether I think it'll actually happen or not. I think it will at some point. If I had to put money on it, I'm excited to see where the story goes. Absolutely, I'm glad. I would have been really disappointed if they'd finished the story there in Shenmue 3. I don't think it would have been. I kind of feel like it will never be finished, but I don't think that that's a bad thing.
Hmm.
If that makes any sense.
I
Uh,
kind of think Shenmue will be finished, quote unquote, like the original story arc, because it was supposed to be a Virtua Fighter RPG. I
mm,
could see the story with Lan Di wrapping up at the end of Shenmue 2, where Akira defeats Lao.
hmm.
And
Okay.
then, you're familiar with Virtua Fighter 3, and a lot of the moves from Virtua Fighter 3 are in the Shenmue games. So it's almost like the Shenmue story is wrapping up the Virtua Fighter 2 storyline and beginning the Virtua Fighter 3. So I think that Shenmue will end where Virtua Fighter 3 begins.
Okay. You think it's
So
that the parallels are so clear here,
I would say so.
2 and 3.
Yeah.
I don't. I really loved your lore videos, by the way, on YouTube. They're great. I
Oh, thank you.
don't. There's only just little bits I could glean from like the Virtua Fighter 2 instruction manual. The story was so brief, but as you say, there is one.
There is. There's a bit of a storm here, so if you hear some rumbling, that's from the lightning and thunder. But I would say it's hard to learn about Virtua Fighter's 2 story because you don't know you don't get the complete Virtua Fighter 2 story until you read the Virtua Fighter 3 manual. So you learn about
Okay.
what happened in 2 from 3,
Hmm.
and you don't learn about what
Certainly.
happened in 3 until you read 4's manual and so forth. Um,
Okay.
and there are animes too, Virtua Fighter animes that kind of wrap it up and get you into stuff like that.
Yeah, I've never seen the animes, to be honest. I did try watching them once, and
They're
I don't
silly,
know.
but they're pretty fun.
Yeah, I think it was the art style kind of
Speaking of
put me off
animes,
a little bit.
there's a Shenmue anime in the works.
There is. Yeah, I'm intrigued. Um, I do,
I am too.
yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Sure, anything Shenmue, within reason, I'll definitely give it a whirl. Is that supposed to be like next year or?
I don't know when it's supposed to be. I was actually worried if it was still going to be a thing or not, but then I saw on Twitter somebody said, "Hey, are you still doing Shenmue the anime?" And the guy working on it was like, "Yeah, it's coming along. We're really pleased with how it's going, but it's just
Mhm.
been quiet." And so I'd like to see some buzz come back from that. I'm actually more keen on news for the Shenmue anime than I am for 4 right now, just because
Mhm.
I really like that kind of stuff. But I definitely think we should be optimistic. I say this all the time, but it's easier to get Shenmue 4 than it ever was to get 3.
Yeah, of
Like
course.
4 feels
Yeah,
realistically doable. 3 was impossible, and we did the impossible.
yeah,
So why can't we do 4?
absolutely. Yeah. Um, they said that sales obviously didn't set the world on fire, but they were adequate.
Yeah, they were good
It's
enough.
not.
And look, I mean, it was a very successful Kickstarter, so you can't say you're not going to make millions of dollars off of this.
Yeah, of
Like, come
course.
on. The money was already made with the Kickstarter. It's more like, okay, can we make more money off the mass market appeal? Can we get a franchise going? Um, it's an investment. So they're investing into this franchise, and will the investment process be worth it? And I think it really will, and I think that the Shenmue anime will be a big shot in the arm
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
in terms of that.
Does it have anything to do with Sega,
The
the
anime,
anime? Yeah, or is it kind of
I
a
feel like Sega's pretty hands off
okay? So is it like
with Shenmue.
Yu Suzuki has the license, does he? No, Shenmue
Yeah,
allowed.
they let him take it. I mean, I think it's still technically they own it, but they're very like, now that you got it, we're not going to spend time on it. In fact, if you'll notice in Virtua 5 Ultimate Showdown, they kind of like scrubbed away a lot of the Shenmue references from
Right.
it, which kind of makes sense because Yakuza people went in and put it in their engine, you know. So,
Of
um,
course, yeah.
not trying to say like, yeah, these Yakuza guys don't like Shenmue and they're destroying the legacy. It's not that. It's just like, you know, they're kind of.
Are you enjoying Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown?
I am very much. I go back and forth on what's the best console version of Virtua Fighter 5. Because Final Showdown has all the characters and it had really fun costumes with cool win poses.
Hmm.
Like you can have Sarah Bryant dressed like Ooh La La from Space Channel 5 shooting her little blasters and so like that's awesome. You don't
Yeah.
have that yet in Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown. Of course, we don't have all the DLC out yet. I love that you can have the VF1 skins in Ultimate Showdown.
Mm.
I think the netcode is above average.
Hmm.
Uh, I think it's beautiful. I love the Yakuza engine graphics. I've
It
been
looks
having
great.
a
It
blast
does.
with it. Do you play?
Yeah, well, a little bit. I'll be honest. I probably prefer the original release of 5, just because I've never got on too well with online play because I
Yeah.
spent so much time playing it on my own, basically,
Oh, I need to add you
against the
on
computer.
PlayStation 4. We should play some Virtua Fighter.
Oh, absolutely, we should. I'm competent, I'm not a great player by any means, but I enjoy it. I mean,
I
like,
suck, so it's okay.
oh, okay, all right, that sounds good. I mean, 5, it had the quest mode or whatever it was called, which I used to
Yeah,
really enjoy, and
yeah,
that's probably
vanilla
the
fun.
only criticism I have of it. Um,
Yeah, and it had better environmental visuals than Final Showdown did. Better lighting
mhm,
effects and snow and rain and
mhm.
whatever.
Yeah, I find it a little bit bare bones. That's the only real criticism I have, because it's so great to have it back. And I can
Yes.
totally understand them trying to test the waters to see if there's enough interest in it to then hopefully
Yeah.
go and make a Virtua Fighter 6. But the reception's been good so far, I think. I think it's done better than they expected.
Yes. I think people they criticize it for the netcode and for the audio, which is, you know, quite dated now. But I mean, what were they
Yeah.
gonna do? Like,
It always was though, isn't it?
yeah, it was. That's true. Yeah, it was dated when it was new because it was using Virtua Fighter 4 audio and Virtua Fighter
Yeah,
1
yeah.
audio. So some of it's legacy, some of it's lazy. Um, but
Yeah.
I love it, warts and all. I really love that I can play Ultimate Showdown, and it looks with that new coat of paint, it's superb.
Yeah. It's a fantastic game. In gameplay terms, it's just flawless. I mean, it's the work of an obsessive genius, you know?
Definitely. Um, on Twitter, somebody was saying, I think somebody from Sega said that if there's going to be a Virtua Fighter 6, it needs to innovate. So, what kind of innovations do you think Virtua Fighter 6 would need to do to make it profitable for Sega to keep investing in?
Um, I often think with 3D beat 'em ups that even looking at Tekken 7 and Soul Calibur, whatever we're up to now, the physics hasn't changed much in probably 20 years at least. Like there isn't a sort of complex physics system in there. It still seems to be relying on more or less canned animations. It's a little bit hard to describe.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember completely different game, of course, but 2008 when GTA 4 came out, the physics model that they used was absolutely incredible to me. The way that, how do you call it, ragdoll physics or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, he could kind of trip over railings and he'd fall awkwardly, and it's kind of more complex physics model in there. I don't think I've really seen that in one of the big fighting games yet.
Hmm.
I think the animation still looks a little bit. It's kind of old fashioned.
Yeah.
So I don't
It
know.
holds
Maybe
up
they could.
well for how old it is, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's true of all the big fighting games. I don't think they've made that leap. But Virtua Fighter always pushed the envelope, so to speak, back in the day. So perhaps something along those lines. I don't think that would make it more profitable, but I think it would be could definitely change some of the fundamental, mechanics of the game. I'd be interested to see something like that. And perhaps aesthetically, as an old man, I probably prefer the style of the older games.
Yeah. Especially four.
um,
Four was really good.
yeah, yeah. There's, I think the big fighting games, have converged a little bit. They're not quite as distinctive as they used to be back in the day. Tekken had that really kind of grungy
Hmm.
sci-fi PlayStation vibe to it, and it was
Yeah.
slightly kind of weirdly haunting atmosphere to it. All the techno music, and Virtua Fighter had the blue skies and
Yep.
incredibly clean style and the higher resolution on the Saturn and all that kind of thing. And they all had their own distinctive qualities anyway. And I feel like they've converged a little bit. They're less identifiable than they used to be. Not completely, But
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I'd like some of the distinctive character of Virtua Fighter to come back a
Hmm.
little bit in the next game. But it'll just be a thrill to get Virtua Fighter 6 in any form, to be honest. So
Exactly. Exactly right. But man, what a time to be alive as a Virtua Fighter fan and a Shenmue fan to see both of these dormant franchises reviving. I think that's really cool. RetroMuel, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I could go on and on for hours and hours more about Virtua Fighter and Shenmue, but I know that we both have lives. Hope maybe we
unfortunately,
could do this again sometime. I'd love to pick your brain more about this stuff. Very insightful, very enjoyable. Before we do end the podcast, though, I would like to have a brief trivia round with you, if that's okay.
yes, I'm strapped in. I'm
All
ready.
right.
Let's go.
So, as I'm sure you're well aware, the Shenmue series has characters that use the move lists of Virtua fighters, such as Akira Yuki, Sarah Bryant, Jeffrey McWild, and so forth, Lao Chan as well. And I wanted to play a little game with you. I don't know what I would call the game. I usually have a name for it. I
Oh,
didn't think of a name for this, but basically the way the game works is I will list some Shenmue characters, and you match them to their corresponding Virtua Fighters.
okay.
Um,
I'm sorry, I'm
so,
just distracted by the fire alarm
oh
going
no,
off.
are you
Can
on
you hear
fire?
that? No, I'm not having a fire. It's just the kitchen. But I was just wondering if that's coming over the
It is a little
microphone.
bit. That's okay.
Okay, all right. Go
Are,
ahead.
are
Go
you
ahead.
sure you're okay?
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good.
Man, I
Just
knew
a
this was going to be a good episode. It's on fire, as they say. Had to put his
yeah.
alarm out because it's getting
We'll
so
get a
high.
brick through the window or something now, just to top it off. Anyway, no, go
Okay,
ahead, man. Sorry.
no, you're fine. So basically, I'm going to give you a Shenmue character, and you're going to tell me which Virtua Fighter character that it borrows moves from. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I've got 10 questions. We're going to see how many of these you can get right. If you can get 7 out of 10, you're passing. You keep your dignity. If you get less than
Okay.
7 out of 10, you still keep your dignity because you're a good guy, but you didn't
Okay.
quite pass. So let's just
All
see,
right.
just for fun, no pressure. Number one, Chai.
Chai would be Leon, I
Mm,
believe.
that's correct. Yes, Leon
Praying
Rafal.
mantis style.
I appreciate that you called him Leon and not Lion. A lot of people call him Lion.
Lion.
But
Yeah.
Leon does mean lion, so it's kind of all the same.
I think they didn't spell it right, did they? If it's a French name, I think it should be Leon with an E. Anyway,
Oh, it could be. That's possible.
who
And
knows?
then Rafal is the same as Raphael, so they mean the same thing. So
Yeah.
some people call him Lion Raphael, and it's, but you would say it Leon Rafal. So I don't know. Anyway, okay. Next up, how about Landy?
He would be Lau, if that's how you pronounce his name. I've never been too sure.
Yes, Lao Chan. Very good. So you've got you're 2 for 2 so far. You're doing very well. Okay, this next one, he might not be well known. Pedro Warren. He's the Mad Angel
Oh my
that
word.
you fight at the end of the 70-man battle.
Am I able to Google this just to get the image?
Yeah, yeah, you can Google Pedro. He
Oh, that's tough.
he's in those
Yeah.
chaps. He looks like a
The
village person.
slightly camp Freddie Mercury type, is it?
Yes, yes, the Freddie Mercury guy.
Oh, God, I'm trying to think. He's got like big kicks and things, doesn't he? Is he? Oh, Jeffrey.
uh,
No.
I would say, okay, I could now listen. If I'm wrong, you can tell me in the comments. But I did not see Jeffrey. There could be more than one right answer, by the way. If some characters have more than one uh, character in their move list, not many, but some do. With Pedro, he does a lot of drop kicks and shoulder slams.
Wolf.
He is Wolf. He uses
Oh,
Wolf.
okay.
Very
Okay.
interesting.
It's a fine
Okay,
line.
it is. It is quite a fine line. Next is Rod Stunt. He's the guy in uh,
Yeah.
Kowloon with the afro.
He is Jeffrey, isn't he?
Correct. He is Jeffrey.
Yes.
So now you're three
Good.
out of four, 75% so far, doing well.
Okay.
Let's do a couple more of those fighters, those street fighters from Shenmue 2. Chunyan.
She is Sarah
Correct.
Bryant, I believe.
You are right about that. Sarah Bryant. And how about Greg Moore? He's the bald biker guy with the butterfly jacket. Very intimidating.
Um, let me just think about that. He is Wolf, isn't he?
He is Wolf. Very good.
Ugh,
So
I'm
you
on
can see
fire.
Pedro and Greg both use Wolf.
Yeah.
So you're 5 out of 6. You're doing really well. How about Baihu?
He would be Lau again, wouldn't he?
Yes, that's another Lao. You're
Oh,
6 out of 7,
too good. I'm
so you only
smoking.
need one more. There's 3 questions left. You only need one more to pass.
Okay.
I'd say you're doing incredibly well so far. How about the tomato store girl, the tomato store convenience, the convenience store girl from Shenmue 2, Izumi Takano?
Yeah. Now that's pretty obscure. She, if I remember correctly, would be Pi or Pei Pi.
She is not Pi.
Oh no.
She actually is also Sarah. And I
Is
would have
she?
also
Oh, okay, yeah.
possibly accepted Jackie because
She
if you
does a
remember,
somersault kick and all that kind of thing.
yeah, and Sarah also has the somersault kick, but she'll go Sakura Festival, boom, and like
Oh,
one
yeah.
inch punch you.
God damn it.
It's okay. That's okay. So there were two Sarahs. How about this one? You only need one more. You got two questions left. You're doing good.
All right, all right.
How about Don Yu?
That's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm. Big fat guy.
Does he correspond? I suppose he would be Taka Arashi.
He is Taka Arashi.
Oh,
So you've already
thank
passed.
God.
Well done. At the end there, he's rushing towards you like a sumo.
Yeah, that never occurred to me before, actually.
Yeah. Uh,
I just beat him this morning, actually, when I was preparing my Shenmue 2 video, doing some
nice.
capturing.
But he's a
Yeah.
hybrid actually because he has some of the moves from someone else. You actually see one of these moves in a cutscene. If you fail the cutscene, he comes out of the closet and he grabs you in the face and throws you on the ground. Do you know whose move that is?
Is this the bonus point, or is this
Yeah,
the
this is a bonus point.
when he comes out of the closet? Quite
Yes.
literally.
Yes, quite literally. He does.
Um, and he does what? He throws you to the floor.
He grabs Rio by the face, picks him up by his face, and throws him on the ground.
Um, that sounds like, is that Jeffrey?
That is Jeffrey. I think they call
Oh,
it the Iron Claw. That's one of
yeah.
his moves from Virtua Fighter 1. Very brutal
Of course,
looking.
and they're kind of grabbing at their neck, trying to get free, and
Yeah.
that whole animation. Yeah.
So
Okay.
just with his big, huge hand, he just grabs your face and picks you up, and you're squirming, and he just throws you down.
Yeah.
That frightened me as a kid. I was like, that's insane.
Brutal.
All
Yeah.
right.
The actually the animations, to digress a bit, in Virtua
Mm,
Fighter. I remember the original game.
yes.
I remember actually the first time I played the game, it was in an arcade in a really completely random seaside resort in Wales, which is like it was perpetual rain and all the rest of it. But the animations in that first game actually made me wince. I remember playing it with my dad, and that was how realistic it seemed at the time compared to Street Fighter 2 or something, you know. I
That's
remember us
awesome.
just sitting there going, oh, you know, seeing people getting kicked in the face. And it's hard to get that across to people who are so used to 3D beat 'em ups, but it was so kind of wild, like visceral at the time.
Yes.
It's
And
almost
it's
like
still,
when you see those guys at the cinema kind of seeing a train rush towards them and they all run away screaming, you know.
yeah, yeah.
It's kind of
It
like,
people still feel it. It still has impact when a big hit like that happens. Like when Jeffrey does the splash mountain on someone, even in Virtua Fighter 1, people are like, ooh, like that
yeah,
300-pound man just jumped on your head with your own
yeah,
body. Like,
uh, definitely. It's like because probably partly because there aren't any fireballs or crazy flying kicks, this, that, and the other. That the impact of those blows just make you wince, you know.
yeah, that arcade realism was just almost tangible, uh,
Yeah.
I would say. So, okay, well, with your bonus point, that takes you from 7 up to 8. So you passed with a bonus point. But for the victory round, let's just see if you can get some more bonuses here. Um, this person has many Virtua Fighter character moves corresponding to them. It's Ryo
Mhm.
Hazuki,
Yes.
which Virtua Fighter character's moves does he share?
Well, Akira,
That's one.
first and foremost, he has Kage, Cage,
Kagimaru. That's great.
Cage,
Yeah.
as I used to call him as a
You
kid.
ruined it. You called him Cage after that. But yeah, Kagi, yeah. Lion and
um,
Cage.
yeah. Who else? I'm not. Oh, I suppose he's got quite a few throws, isn't he? Is there a bit of Wolf in there too?
There's no wolf.
Jeffrey.
He does have Jeffrey's toe kick. Do you remember his toe kick there?
Okay, yeah,
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 he's got
vaguely.
that.
And then
Uh,
I'm stumped after that. I'm sorry.
he's wearing a leather jacket.
Jackie, of course.
Does have Jackie's punch, that whip punch.
Of
He'll do
course he
that.
does, yeah.
Hmm.
That's my favorite Virtual Fighter character as well. Well, not my favorite character, but the only one I can play well. So I
Rio
should know
really
that,
seems
really.
like, doesn't he seem like a composite to you between Akira and Jackie? Like you take two of Virtua Fighter's most iconic characters and you synthesize them into Rio, and then sprinkle in a bunch of Kagimaru's moves,
Yeah, he's got the
his
cool,
throws.
if you will, aspect of Jackie, hasn't he? The spiky hair, the
Hmm.
leather jacket.
That's
But
right.
yeah, he's definitely less Japanese than Akira.
Right.
Traditionally Japanese, anyway.
Exactly. He's got that 80s flair. He looks a lot like Yu Yu Hakusho or something with his
Yeah.
white shirt, his leather jacket, his brown leather jacket.
Yeah. What a
Um,
dude. What a look.
I know. Total Chad. Uh, let's see here. Well, I found two more, technically three. I can just share them with you quickly here.
Yeah.
You know when he does that throw where he kicks you with his foot and he lays on his back and throws you over? I
Yeah.
thought that was Kage's move, but it's actually not because Kage would do a 10-foot toss with that. If you wanted just a
Uh-huh.
normal back throw, that was actually Aoi Umenakoji.
Ah, okay.
She also
Yeah.
uses jujitsu, so they're both are jujitsu users. Also, at the end of Shenmue 1, you learn how to do the swallow. What's it called? The swallow flip, where you flip
Swallow
them
flip,
over
I
and punch
think.
them on
Yeah.
the ground.
Yeah.
That is Pai Chan's move.
Ah, okay.
She has that
Yeah.
counter from Virtua Fighter 1.
Some Chinese styles creeping in there.
Yes. So in a
Wonder where he
sense, you
learned those.
yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, that's what he's doing is in Shenmue 1, everything's taking him, it's pointing him towards China, Chinese martial arts, Chinese culture, Chinese mysticism, Chinese philosophy. It's all pointing that way. But with a composite of so many characters, couldn't we also call Ryo Dural?
Ah, I suppose we could.
Yeah, in a
Yeah.
way.
That would have been quite a different game if it'd been a 6 foot block of metal walking around. The realism might have suffered a little bit, but
Yeah, and
could have made it work.
with no top on as well, that would draw some stares.
Yeah. Dural, I hate with a passion. She's Virtua Fighter 2 particularly.
She's so cheap.
Oh, actually, the AI in that game in single player is not great, to be honest. Virtua Fighter 2. That's the only criticism I could make of it. Really, there's a lot of exploits you can make
Yeah.
because some of the characters are basically impossible. I would say
Yeah, you
Kage
have to
particularly.
exploit it. Yeah, you have to cheese the AI or else you'll never win because it can
Yeah,
just guess your inputs. It just reads
yeah,
your inputs. It's so cheap.
yeah. So I did find myself just running in and doing a throw. I'm sure there's other ways of doing it, but you can trap
Yeah.
them in a pattern where you run in with
Hmm.
Jackie at least, throw them
Oh
on the
yeah, you can
ground,
do that. With
zip back
Jeffrey,
out.
if you do his butt move where you push PKG and he'll hit you with his butt, like the
Oh yeah,
computer
okay.
never dodges that. Almost never. They just go,
Oh
oh,
really?
get hit with it. Or if you back up and wait for them to run in on you, you can do that.
Okay. Yeah,
So
3 for me has the best AI. It's I don't know which one of them is my favorite really. The original 3, I've got the arcade versions of them, and but 3 is the most fun to play. Definitely the most. The AI is quite unpredictable, and
yeah,
the uneven surfaces and everything.
right.
There's more
And
depth there, definitely.
sidestepping with a button kind of messes up the whole like 3 button purity of Virtua Fighter to me, but you get used to it, I guess.
Yeah, I tend to not use it too much, to be honest. The dodge button.
Yeah.
Um, they didn't
There's some moves
quite.
that require the dodge button though.
Yeah, is the one where you? I think they figured it out with Virtua Fighter 4. Just
Yeah.
kind of. Yeah, they do. Can you kind of dodge around and then press guard, punch, and kick at the same time? Or
Right.
is that Virtua Fighter 4? I can't remember.
I don't know if you can do it in 4, but you can definitely do it in 5.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm not a master by any means, but
Nor am I. I just really like it. I'm terrible at it, but I really like it. I think that's all you need is passion.
definitely,
Don't have
definitely.
skill, but I try to make up for it with passion. Well, RetroMuel, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Very insightful and delightful. Please go check out RetroMuel's channel. Give his Shenmue video, "The Impossible Dream," a Shenmue retrospective, a watch, and keep friends and those you love close to you.